Batman, Caped Crusader is brought to you by the letters D, E, and I. Now available in paperback at e-readers. Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Better get the cool slow, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. I got a chance to take a look at Batman Caped Crusader on Amazon Prime when I got a free subscription for 30 days. And after watching all 10 episodes of Batman Caped Crusader, I can say that Batman Caped Crusader falls far short of the high standards set by 1992's Batman the Animated Series. Now, Batman the Animated Series, when it came out in 1992, the year I graduated high school, was considered a groundbreaking animated series at the time because it was one of the first animated series to basically push the creative envelope as related to the medium of animation here in America. Because before Batman the Animated Series, most animated series were usually just 30-minute commercials just to sell toys. However, Batman the Animated Series basically took animation and turned it into the art form that people in Japan enjoy in anime. And as a result, we got an animated series that basically gave us rich, complex storylines with rich, multi-dimensional characters in a beautifully hand-drawn animated series that basically took the Batman characters and made them into icons for an entire generation. And Batman the Animated Series was a revolutionary animated series because it basically showed us how animation was not just a cartoon, but was an art form, and gave us, again, more richer, more complex storytelling that all ages could enjoy, and also gave us performances from actors that were on the level of theater. And all of that was really due to the people behind the scenes of Batman the Animated Series, such as Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, Andrea Romano, and Rick Burchett, and they basically were the ones who gave us the beautiful Batman the Animated Series, but sadly, many of those people were not available for Batman Caped Crusader, and that's why Batman Caped Crusader is a pale shadow of Batman the Animated Series, and does not really capture the heart and soul of the Batman character the way Batman the Animated Series did. Now, when it comes to Batman Caped Crusader, this whole animated series, yes, you've got Bruce Timm on animation, but the sad part is you don't have Paul Dini on writing, you don't have Rick Burchett as the producer to set the vision, and you definitely don't have Andrea Romano. And without those people, the Batman Caped Crusader just basically falls flat as a 2D picture because it lacks the depth and the substance of Batman the Animated Series. Now, when it comes to Batman Caped Crusader, while the animation is beautiful from Bruce Timm and basically reminds me a lot of old Fleischer cartoons from the 1940s, where it falls apart is basically in two elements. One is the writing, and two is the voice acting, which basically feels very stiff. And the whole problem with Batman Caped Crusader basically is the writing, because they did not take the time to adapt this source material and really capture who Batman is. No, what happens here is that because you've got different producers like J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves and Scott Snyder, instead of having people like Rick Burchett and Paul Dini, is you get an adaptation that doesn't look to capture the heart of who Batman is. No, what they really want to do is give us Batman in a world where it has a gynocentric perspective, and the women are presented as the lead characters, and Batman is a background character in his own story, and that basically throws off the entire story dynamics of Batman Caped Crusader, because when you watch a Batman series, you want to answer one critical question as related to who is the main character, what do they want, and why should we care? And the answers to those questions should be, who is the main character, and that is Batman. What does he want? He wants to mete out justice, and we want to care because he's a superhero. Unfortunately, we can't get those questions answered because we're distracted by all of these producers like Matt Reeves and definitely J.J. Abrams. I feel his fingerprints all over this, and Bruce Timm and Scott Snyder. You've got too many cooks in the soup, and basically they want to put ingredients into a Batman story set in the Golden Age that don't really fit within the dynamics. And because they want to put these different elements into this story, it basically throws off the entire dynamics of this story as related to not only the context of history, but also to the overall whole paradigm of a Batman story. No, because they want to go out here and put all of this feminism into this series and want to put identity politics into this series, it basically makes it where you really cannot, the stories can't have that emotional impact the way they're supposed to. No, because they keep throwing in all of these different elements that really don't fit into Batman stories. We really don't get to see Batman being the center of his story. Now, the creators want to say they wanted to, again, do something different, but their attempts to do something different basically are not a Batman story, and many of the characters that they call themselves adapting don't feel like Batman characters. No, they feel like completely different people, and that's what makes this series have a completely odd feel as related to being a Batman series. Now, this whole adaptation, again, is more focused on women like Renee Montoya and Harley Quinn, and definitely Barbara Gordon, and they basically feel like lead characters, and Batman feels like a background character in this story that basically feels more gynocentric than basically being the male-centered story that it originally was. And that really, again, made everything just feel completely off as related to the storytelling, which really feels, again, very two-dimensional, because unlike the original Batman, the animated series, where we got to see these really great 3 and 4 multi-dimensional characters that basically felt like real people, these characters basically feel like cardboard cutouts of other characters. They don't really feel like the actual characters from Batman comics. And an example of this is the Black Commissioner James Gordon and the Black Barbara Gordon. Overall, I mean, the Black Commissioner Gordon doesn't feel like the Jim Gordon from the comics or the Jim Gordon from the Batman the Animated Series, and that's basically because they made him a black character, and once they made him a black character, he became a completely different person. And in the case of Barbara Gordon, she doesn't feel like any Batgirl or any Barbara Gordon I have seen from her first appearance in the Batman 66 series, where Barbara Gordon was a librarian, or the Barbara Gordon from the 1970s comics, who was a librarian who became a congresswoman. I mean, I don't see anything like the Barbara Gordon from the comics. No, when I visually look at her, she reminds me a lot of the Isis character I created and gives me ideas for a 1940s Isis design. But the whole thing is she doesn't look or feel like Barbara Gordon at all. She doesn't look or feel like Barbara Gordon. No, she feels like a completely different character. And that's one of the issues I have, along with the Asian Harley Quinn. I mean, the Asian Harley Quinn doesn't feel like Harley Quinn at all, doesn't look like Harley Quinn. Again, if you gave these characters different names, they could basically stand up and be unique characters, but when they go out here and put the names of those characters on these characters, it doesn't feel right, and again throws off the dynamics of the storytelling and throws off the entire paradigm of the stories that they're trying to tell in Batman Caped Crusader. And that's what makes it very difficult to watch this series, is that you're being told that this is a Batman series, but none of the characters look or feel like Batman characters, and even worse, since they're two-dimensional, you really don't get any sort of depth or layers that make these characters resonate with you and make you connect with these characters. and really make these characters come to life and make you say that you want to root for these characters. No, with every episode of Batman Caped Crusader, I felt very indifferent, and I felt very indifferent because none of these characters were very engaging. Even though they were race swapped again, they didn't have any of the depth or the heart of their white counterparts. They were just, again, feeling like tokens that were there just to move the story and didn't really come to life the way they were supposed to. Now, the other aspect of storytelling that falls apart here in Batman Caped Crusader is the effort to shoehorn these characters into a golden age aesthetic and set this series in the 1930s and early 1940s. That's what really further throws off the dynamic of this series. What further throws it off is the fact that this story is set in a golden age era, and with everything set in a golden age era, it doesn't really line up historically. It doesn't line up historically because the golden age of comics was a period where white male superheroes basically dominated the entire genre, and they usually dominated the genre because we were in the middle of a period called Jim Crow in America, where black people were in a second class, and Asians were in a class being degraded, and Hispanics were basically, again, in that same boat. And this was one of the most racist periods in history. Yet what we have in Batman Caped Crusader is an effort to talk about adding diversity and inclusion to an era that was considered to be one of the most racist periods in history, a period in history where we had the most lynchings of black people in history. But the creators of Batman Caped Crusader want us to believe that a black man would be a commissioner of the police in an era where there were the most lynchings in history. Moreover, they want us to believe that a black woman would be in a place where she could be a public defender when black people weren't even allowed to have those kinds of jobs in municipalities due to the discrimination of the North and the Jim Crow going on in the South. Not to mention, when it came to Asians, again, racism was going on, and there wouldn't be white people looking to go to an Asian therapist. No, they would go to an Asian acupuncturist or exotic medicine at the time, but they were not looking to go to an Asian therapist and get counseling, and that person wouldn't even be able to get that kind of job, again, due to the discrimination that went on in the North and the Jim Crow going on in the South. So this series basically feels like it's like some sort of a just dysfunctional mess, and feels like a dysfunctional mess because it doesn't flow within the lines of history, doesn't really flow within the lines of history. So when you watch things in this whole animated series and you just look at them and you understand West American history, you look at this and you go, this doesn't make sense. And if you were to line it up with the comics of the Golden Age, it really wouldn't fit within the historical context of the Golden Age. No, you're trying to give me Golden Age Batman in a modern world, and that just doesn't work. I mean, what made things work for the original Batman, the animated series, was, yes, they did give us that Art Deco style, but the whole thing is that they set it in a modern world. Yes, you had Art Deco designs, but it was a clearly modern world with computers and technology. But that's what's really missing here, because we clearly see the whole disjointed aesthetic of this whole animated series. We see the clearly disjointed aesthetic because we have a 1930s series, people using 1930s and 1940s slang, people dressed like the 1930s, driving 1930s or 1940s cars, and we basically look at it and we see this world where you've got all of this forced diversity and inclusion. Moreover, what you've also got are a feminist and gynocentric perspective where the women are leading the stories, and Batman is in the background of his own series, basically emasculated like many of the male characters in this series, who basically feel completely neutered and feel completely powerless in this series. I mean, we really don't get that sense of a man being a hero or a man being a protector, because what they're looking to do is push their agenda in between the lines of this story. As they look to push their agenda between the lines of Batman Caped Crusader, we see that it's more about Batman Social Justice Crusader, really, because the Social Justice Crusaders are people like Renee Montoya, Harleen Quinzel, and Barbara Gordon, who basically is like a bait and switch. They're basically making her like she's the lead character out here, because she's basically capable of doing everything almost like Batman can do. I mean, if you look at Barbara Gordon, they basically have her as super black woman in this series. And Batman really is like, it's like, does he really need to be here? Because Barbara basically does a lot of stuff. I mean, I know that they're trying to build into her being Batgirl, but again, it just doesn't flow organically. It just feels really forced. And it feels forced because Batman is not the lead character in his own series. He's not the head of his own story. And even worse, it seems like they throw a lot of old ideas that Batman creators walked away from onto the page, and it really shows how a lot of those ideas don't really work inside of this story. It really shows how these ideas were rejected, and as they put these ideas in the story, they really just don't really flow well very organically. And even worse than that is that because there's no clear hero, because the writers don't really know how to write a hero, what we get is another part of that disturbing trend that I've been seeing with superhero series of people trying to make villains to be sympathetic. That's what I really didn't like about this series. We got sympathetic villains in Harley Quinn. We got sympathetic villains in Catwoman. We got sympathetic villains in Two-Face. And the Batman bad guys are not seen as bad guys. I mean, really, this is where the writers really didn't understand the assignment, because they didn't, again, understand the whole psychology of Batman. They didn't understand that these villains are have obsessions, and it's the obsessions that drive them to commit crimes. And they walked away from that entire story element and that whole story point, and it basically further throws Batman off to the left, because you've got villains who we're sympathetic to, and no real motivation to be sympathetic to them. I mean, with the old Batman animated series, we understood how their obsessions basically drove them to become evil. We understood how their obsessions made them dangerous and out of control, and how Batman had to stop them because their obsessions were going to put people in harm's way. That was a core element of psychology that made Batman the Animated Series fantastic show. And basically, one of the elements that I use in much of my storytelling that I learned from Batman the Animated Series was the use of psychology, because we want to understand what motivates people to do what they do. I mean, that whole element is missing, and that's what takes a lot of the depth and the layers out of characters. I mean, with the Two-Face episode, we really lost that whole dynamic, and it really made the character shallow. So we really didn't understand that Harvey Dent was feeling powerless as related to things, and he had the big bad Harv persona that he suppressed, and the big bad Harv power was the thing that drove him insane after his face got disfigured, because he felt he could finally take power that he couldn't take as the DA. I mean, there was a whole lot of psychology in Batman the Animated Series that Caped Crusader doesn't have. And while we've got monotone Harleen Quinzel, who becomes Harley Quinn, we don't have what motivates her to feel insane to point to that she's obsessed with taking power. No, we've got social justice warrior Harley Quinn, who basically is just going after rich white men because she just wants to hurt white males. And that's not enough to make me care about this character and really connect and see how dangerous this character is. I mean, I don't see how Asian Harley Quinn is a threat the way I saw how Harleen Quinzel in the original animated series was, because she had that codependent relationship with the Joker, because the Joker basically made her insane and broke her down to the point where she basically depended on the Joker for validation and approval. I mean, if you watch Mad Love had far more complexity than this whole series in all of its seasons. I mean, Mad Love really showed us what drove Harley Quinn to become this codependent person, but we get none of that psychology as related to storytelling. No, we get storytelling that, again, is just very shallow and flat, and this very shallow, flat storytelling in Batman Caped Crusader is why this series, it just does not save the day, and I wouldn't consider it to be a successor to Batman the Animated Series. No, that crown still goes to Batman Beyond, because Batman Beyond did a beautiful job of taking the Batman character in his older days and showing how he was passing his mantle on to Terry McGinnis, because Terry McGinnis was a richer, more multidimensional character, a character who basically brings Batman full circle in that he was like the guy who basically took the life of his family and suffered a tragedy, and as he suffered this tragedy, wanted to go out here and do good. And as he did good, he was in a futuristic world that had, again, a lot of rich multidimensional characters, a lot of characters who had obsessions and motivations that made them credible threats. But with Batman Caped Crusader, I just see a pale, shallow adaptation that just isn't worthy of the mantle of Batman the Animated Series and isn't fit to even carry the cape of Batman. No, I see an animated series that basically, again, while it has beautiful animation, has very weak storytelling and just has very, very weak voice acting. Very weak voice acting compared to what the performances Andrea Romano was able to get out of her performers, because Andrea Romano basically had it where it was literally like watching a live television drama in every episode of not only Batman the Animated Series, but Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, and possibly Static Shock. The voice animation on all of those series felt like real life drama come to life, and that's what made those series innovative and revolutionary as related to the genre of hand-drawn animation. That voice acting in and of itself, along with Paul Dini basically writing a lot of those scripts, and also other writers like Hilary J. Bader and many others. I mean, the writing on the original Batman Timverse series, the writing was next level, and I don't even have to add in Dwayne McDuffie, because his Justice League basically was the period, the exclamation point on the entire Timverse. And again, the writing was the core foundation of what made Batman the Animated Series great, and it's the writing that makes Batman Caped Crusader a mediocre series. It is the writing that makes it mediocre, and the writing basically is mediocre because they were more focused on looking to appeal to identity politics and social justice instead of giving us a straight series set in the 30s, because while the 30s was an extremely racist period, people could understand it in the context of history, understand it in the context of the Golden Age, and you still could have been able to, again, create new, unique characters and fit them into that world. Again, you could have created an Asian character, you could have created black characters, and had it where Batman was not only a Caped Crusader, but was a social crusader as well, looking to fight things like Jim Crow and racism at the time. You could have tackled many issues as related to storytelling, and you could have done it in a way that was unique to this series, but the writers here were lazy and just wanted to cop out, so they shoehorned these token characters into the story. And again, this is what made the entire story of Batman Caped Crusader fall completely apart, because they didn't take the time to go out here and do the research on the history of the Golden Age. They didn't want to talk about the racism that went on in the 1930s. 3, they didn't really want to delve deep into the psychology of people in the 1930s and what motivated them to think the way that they did. And 4, they really didn't want to, again, push that envelope and take on those challenges. No, they wanted to play it safe in an effort to go out here and make a quick cash grab Batman series. And as they looked to make this quick cash grab Batman series, they thought they would be able to make something that would be able to sell merchandise. However, this series basically, I believe, didn't test well in screenings, and that's why you had Warner Brothers executives wanting to shelve Batman Caped Crusader because they knew it wasn't good enough, but because Warner Brothers has been suffering due to a series of box office failures and the struggles with its Max streaming service. This is why David Zaslav had to pull this series out of mothballs, and he pulled this series out of mothballs and sold it to Amazon because he was desperate for cash, because had this series been good, they would have put it on the Max streaming service, and McFarlane Toys would be out here with a Batman Caped Crusader action figure line, but we didn't get any of that, because they knew that the series was a dud, and it was a dud because it was basically, again, not a Batman series with Batman as the center, but was filled with feminist identity politics to show us so-called strong women, and show these strong women at the front of Batman series. And again, this and the bad writing and the bad voice acting basically threw off this entire series, and it basically made the series, again, a struggle to watch. What made it a struggle to watch was seeing the Batman characters basically, again, not treated with the respect that they had in previous series. I mean, I would even say 2003's The Batman series did a better job with its adaptation of Batman, and didn't take as many liberties as this Batman Caped Crusader series did. I mean, this Batman Caped Crusader series basically reminds me of 2002's Birds of Prey, where they took all these liberties and then wanted to say Batman would leave Gotham City, which makes no logical sense because Batman took an oath to protect Gotham City, and the death of Catwoman would not make Batman just go out here and just leave Gotham City. No, Batman always wants to protect Gotham City. So that in and of itself killed Birds of Prey after the first episode, because most comic fans saw that it was full of it. And this series basically, it alienates a lot of comic fans and animated series fans who know the Batman lore, because a lot of stuff ain't lining up. Yes, we get these shallow appearances of characters like Killer Croc. We get a lot of shallow appearances of building a DC universe with characters like Eel O'Brien, which is not done right, because Eel O'Brien was a criminal who eventually became Plastic Man. And we get a reference to Jim Corrigan, who was the Spectre. And again, none of these characters are treated with the respect that they deserve or the respect they're supposed to receive. No, what's done here with these characters is that they're put here to make references as related to building this world. And while some bootlicks will sit there and say, oh, it's an alternate world, no, this isn't an alternate world. This is just a poorly done series by people who didn't have that love for the DC characters the way the original animated team over at for Batman and the DC animated universe had. The people for the DC animated universe, I remember watching my Justice League DVDs and Batman animated series DVDs, and people like the late great Dwayne McDuffie, people like Andrea Romano, people like Rick Burchett and Paul Dini, they had a love for the DC characters, and I believe that love would have come if that same team came on and did a new Batman series. I mean, they would have understood, yeah, we may have to talk about racism, we may have to talk about serious issues, we may have to show people these caricaturized images, but we have to show it in a sensitive way that people understand that, yes, this was what went on at this time, and it wasn't right, and there were people out here like Bruce Wayne who were looking to fight against these things. That's what they could have done, the same way I did it in my book, ISIS Imitation of Life. In my book, ISIS Imitation of Life, it's set in the golden age of the 1930s, and I talk about the racism that goes on in the 1930s, and as I'm talking about it, I show how black people are fighting to be heroes, and while ISIS is a goddess, she cannot be the superhero that she wants, but because she's reading Doc Savage and seeing Pat Savage and thinking that she can be a hero. But the way she's approaching being a hero is the way that helps people, because she understands it's not about power, it's about taking power, and taking power is about showing an example that's right for everyone. I mean, that's what I show in the pages of ISIS Imitation of Life. And again, if I can tell that kind of story, I'm wondering why the people at Warner Brothers couldn't. And again, I think it's because I can definitely see J.J. Abrams looking to shove his feminism in there and his identity politics. That's why we got all these women on there as leads, and basically Batman, a background character. And I see Matt Reeves' kind of the Batman style story that really feels uneven and just overdone, too long. And with the way the series ended, just basically was a disappointment. Yes, Batman has allies, but the whole thing is Batman isn't the symbol of hope for Gotham City, and that's another thing that really hurts this series is we don't see Batman as the symbol of hope that he was in all of the Batman adaptations, because Batman is supposed to be a symbol of hope that inspires people to see hope, similar to the way Superman inspires people to see hope, that in this world of corrupt people, there's still one man who looks to stand for good, and that's one of the elements that really is missing from Batman Caped Crusader. And Batman Caped Crusader, again, is a pale shadow of a series, a pale shadow of an adaptation that just does not meet the high standards that were set by the 1992 Batman the Animated Series, and shows us all why we need to get off this nostalgia tip and start creating original new concepts that will show us stories in a proper context, because I believe we really do need stories that show us history in the proper context and show us how black people being heroes. I mean, if you really want to do an animated series that really will get people's attention on the level of Static Shock, hey, let's do a series about a hero or a heroine in the days of Jim Crow looking to go out here and be that hero, and show how we cannot go out here putting on capes and tights, and how we had to be heroes in a different way because of the things we ran into. No, that's the kind of thing that anime would definitely take a risk on, but I don't think American animation would, because a lot of people are afraid to take risks, and that's where they could have again broke more ground with a Batman series had they took those risks. But instead, what we got was this mediocre series, Batman Caped Crusader, that can't save itself from its poor writing, its poor voice acting, and just uninspired overall aesthetics. I mean, it just doesn't come to life with that magic the way Batman the Animated Series did in 1992, and that's why I have to say again, Batman Caped Crusader just doesn't save the day for me as related to animated programming. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, which shows you black people as heroes, you can pick up the books of the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, and all of those books show you rich, multidimensional, and diverse pictures of characters that are black, and shows you those characters coming to life, and shows you a world of black people that you won't see in mainstream media. And you can pick them all up on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to pick up my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, you can find that comic on Lulu.com for the same price as a 2022 Kickstarter. And you can pick up a digital copy on Amazon.com and Comixology, along with A Steam No Good Deed, which is only 99 cents. You can find those two comics at Amazon in digital and on Lulu in paper, and in the Esteem book, Esteem Blast from the Past. And if you'd like to see me be able to make more videos about science fiction, fantasy, and animation, or you want to help me to be able to make the next full book that I'm doing, or be able to pay for the covers for my books, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.